Hello, everybody. So today we're going to be doing something a little different. We're going to be doing a composite in the strictest sense, but it won't be the composite that we're used to. It's not going to be. It's going to be more along the lines of the photo creations. We've been sort of doing more, I would say, abstract expressionism, or sort of along the lines of like pop art, rather than the sort of representational stuff. Now, this is still, I would call it graphic design, but you could go so far as to call it just visual arts, and just in terms of digital visual arts. So we're going to be learning a few sort of, I would say, tricks, a few things that are I would say useful when it comes to shaping images that you have used that you're using to composite and stuff. Namely, we're going to be talking about the Puppet Warp editing tool, as well as the ability to sort of add some blending options and layer masks. And we'll talk about this as we go through. So I'm going to create a new document that's going to be 9 inches by 9 inches. It could be any kind of dimension you like, but this is what I'm going to be using: 9 by 9, 300 pixels per inch. And I'm just going to hit create. And you can see kind of a preview of what we're looking for here. This right here is it's just sort of a thing I did. I thought, okay, fall, pumpkin and sort of ghostly hands here, kind of like gathering it, and we're just looking, and we're just seeing if we can't maybe have these hands sort of wrap around the pumpkin almost as if they're kind of grabbing it, and we'll see how we do that. So you should have downloaded some of these pictures here. I've got these pictures here. I've got this golden glitter, this action blur shot, this hand here, this other hand here. I've got these pumpkins here. Now, what you can do whatever it is you'd like. You can have the hands holding something else. If you want to find a picture of a soccer ball, or a picture of a baseball or a basketball, or maybe even take one of your classmates and just have them holding up their head. In a sort of abstract way, not in a horror movie way, but basically what we're going to do is just kind of go through, put in the object that they're holding, and then kind of put the hands in, and I'll show you kind of how we'll kind of create this. So let me just go ahead and open this up, take out this folder, I'll just drag this in, and okay. So first off, what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and right click on this layer and rasterize the layer, just to make sure that we can actually edit it. And then we'll make a selection using any number of tools. Now I'm going to be using the magnetic lasso tool, the quick mask tool, just for convenience sake, but I would say the most exact tool you'd probably be able to use would be the brush or the pen tool, making paths around here. So let me see if I can just get through here as quickly as I can, just to save time. I use the pen tool, and I'll show you a couple things with the pen tool in just a second here, but for now, clicking through this right here, we'll just go around the pumpkin, surround it, and this will select just the pumpkin as opposed to using the path tool to select, maybe for instance, the I'm holding on the space bar every time that little hand pops up. I hold out the space bar, I click and I drag just so I can move around, and then we'll just click and we'll close it out, and we'll clean this up with a quick mask tool. Press Q on your keyboard, and so you're given this little whatever is red is not selected, whatever is clear is selected, and you use your brush tool. Paint with black, whatever you want to select. I'm going to see if I can't make sure my brush is hard, 100% hardness. I'll move my size down. I'll move the opacity back up to 100%. I had that set to, and you'll see why I have it set to lower in a second here. I'll go ahead and close just so I can get this smooth here. Okay, now let's go around to the side. There's still a good deal of information that I need to kind of make sure is excluded from the selection, and I'll get into that in a second, but that's okay for now. Alright, okay, I'll get close with the pen, with the brush here. Alright, so just however you select this, if you want to just skip ahead until I have this totally isolated, you can, but I'm just going to get this out of the way here. This. Now what we'll do is we'll use the pen tool. Now one of the things we want to make sure we're using is we're using the actual pen tool that it's set to path. Now, something about the pen tool that you might not already know is that when you lay down your points, you can actually manipulate the points. You actually manipulate how well it's curved, and you can sort of add some corrections to it. For instance, here I've got this path, but if I get real close, I can see that this little bit right here of the pumpkin is not selected. So I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm going to click on one of the anchor points, and it's going to show me just how far curved it is. And I can actually once I hold down the control, I can actually click and drag these objects here. And I can even add sort of a new point here or there. Let me see if I can. I want to say hold down the Alt key. Hold down the Alt key. I could add a new point, and I'll just oops. If you just click on it, once again hold down Control to manipulate these curves. If I just click on it without oops, the wrong button there. So without holding down the Control key, I'll either make a new path or I'll take away one of the anchor points. So if I click on this anchor point without holding down the Control key, it just removes that and makes a straight line here. So I'll just go ahead and make that into a selection, and I'll add it to the selection. And that should hopefully smooth out the edge of the pumpkin there. That's good. And then we'll just go back up here. Let's see if we can select this little area. Oh, that actually was part of the pumpkin. I'll just leave that out. And I think we're good. I just want to make sure I get this part of the. I don't, even if like you could smooth it out, you don't want to. You want to make sure there's no jagged edges left over. Before we selected, holding on the Control key, you can actually move the points around if they're not connected to anything. If you move all the points, if you click on something that's connected here, if you hold this down, it can actually move the entire path. But if it's not if it's not connected to, it's only connected to one thing on one side of the point, the anchor point, then you can actually just move it relative to everything else. Once again, make the selection, add the selection here. Okay. Alright, so I'll just go ahead. Oh, okay, let me see if I can take this a little bit out here. It's a bit too much messed up there. Okay. Alright, gotta move this along here. Alright, now we'll just move this back. Okay, once again, we'll just, in this case, we'll make a selection, and then we'll subtract from selection, and it'll hopefully adhere it closer to the edge there. Let's check my edges. Make sure everything's clean. That's fine. I'll take that. That's okay. Alright, so what we'll do is we'll just get our marquee selection tool selected, pressing M on the keyboard, or just clicking over there on a little dotted rectangle, right click on it, layer via copy, and we'll just get rid of this. Alright, so now we have our pumpkin isolated. And I'll just position my pumpkin into the center of the screen, just to have it there. Here's my little guides. And there's that. And there's that. Okay, it's tilted off to the side, so it may not look like it's in the center. Okay, so the next thing I'll bring in is one of my hands. I'll bring this hand right here, and you can attempt to use you can probably use like the magic wand or the color select tool. If you want to, say for instance, take the image and adjustments and go over to the contrast there and pull up the contrast. Hopefully that will sort of reduce the difference in the whites. That's probably good, but you don't want it to get too overexposed because then it'll be difficult to select just the white. So let's see if I can go to select, color select. Actually, first off, I'll right click on here and I'll rasterize the layer. And what we'll do is we'll go to image, we'll go to select, color select, range rather, and make sure this is set to get rid of this and this. I'm going to select color range and make sure I've got I'm just going to fuzziness here. That's probably good. And what we'll do is we'll just get my quick mask tool and I'll make sure this little bit of the ring is not selected here because I don't want like a random transparent dot worthy. There's that. Okay, and we'll just go ahead and Q. Right, we'll just push delete the keyboard, and then we'll get rid of that. Okay, so that looks good. And then so just to oh, this is too much white was left over on there. You can see there's a bit of a color spill. So what we'll do here is this: we'll get our selection, and we'll go to select, modify, control. In this case, we'll expand. we'll expand it because we're selecting outside of it, and we'll bring it in. Oh, I'm bringing it like 5 pixels here. Getting close. Maybe 7 pixels. We'll have another 5. We'll go to select, modify, expand, 5 pixels. How far does that go in? That seems okay. And we'll just get it real close here. And get our lasso tool and just select down through here. Okay. Alright, with that done, this may cause a bit of. We'll see what happens here. We'll just press delete. Actually, we'll go to select, and we'll go to modify and feather, and we'll feather it by about 2 pixels, and then delete here. And so let's see how this looks compared to everything else. Move this around. Oops. Okay, we got a little bit of white on the hand there. So what we can do with this is we can actually use the spot heal brush to kind of go in there and heal this. So go. It's not really necessary to have it look perfect because we're going to change this color here. All right, so to make this kind of look a little ghostly, first off, let's put a background in there. I'm just going to grab a little two-tone gradient that I use. I use a pink and an orange. I don't know why. I just did. You can use something else. In this case, because we're doing this sort of pop art thing, let's find something that's a little more vibrant than what we normally do when it comes to gradients. Usually when it comes to gradients, subtle is the name of the game, and I'm going to use a linear gradient. Bring this back up to visibility, and I'll just pull this straight down. Hold down the shift key, go straight down. And there's that. And you can obviously go to image adjustments, hue, saturation. You can change the saturation if you want to make it paler, bring the lightness if you want to make it paler in this case, or more white and stuff. So I'll wash it out a little bit. That's okay. Okay, with that done, I'll bring the pumpkin back, and I'll get my hand here, and I'll just shrink my hand down just to it sort of looks like it's holding the pumpkin. In this case, I want the person's thumb to be on the other side, so I'll put this horizontally. I'll rotate this around, so it looks like he's kind of about to hold. He's going to hold the pumpkin up. Now this is might pass. It's passable in terms of is it holding the pumpkin? If you just had it sitting there, maybe. If you weren't really paying attention, maybe. But in this case, we're see if we can't do a little bit better. So first off, I'm going to trim off this wrist a little bit. I'm going to add a little graphical element to the wrist here. I'm going to take this wrist off and just make it to sort of a circle, sort of like seeming it's sort of been. Actually, instead of doing that, I'll do it the other way. I'll go kind of convex instead of concave, like so. And I'll just make this into a selection. And I'll press delete. Okay, and then we'll do now is we'll add in a new layer, and I'll just make a path like so. We'll do this. I'll start off on this corner here and move over here to the other corner, and then I'll make a curve like so. And let's go right, a little bit more shallow, and I can even, hold on Control and sort of manipulate this point here to see if I can pull it down some more. That's probably good. Okay, I'll call that. And then I'll right click on this, make a selection, and I'll just fill it with white here. Bucket tool, fill it with white. So there you go. So there's that. Okay. All right. So with that, I'll just leave that alone for now. And I'm just going to click over here. I'll just scroll out and pull this over here. I'll just go to Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation. I'll just change the hue until I get it to a color that I like. You can change it to whatever color you like. I'm going to change it to blue because blue is orange's complement. So if you have something that you like better, if you have another color that you like, then you can obviously use some other color. Depending on what kind of color palette you've got in the back, blue's going well with the pinks and the oranges and stuff, I think. Maybe you can further make it a little more blue. You can adjust the saturation if you like, make it a little bit deeper blue. This slowly becomes more like indigo. I think I'll bring the saturation slightly. I'll bring the lightness down, so it's sort of a dark blue. Okay, so let's do the other hand real quick. There's a little bit of nail missing there, but that's okay. I'll fix that in a second. So let me get the other hand. The other hand's going to just be pulled in like so. That's the hand. That's the same hand. I'll grab this hand here because it's going to be grabbing the other side, and we'll do the same deal as before. I'm actually going to remove some of the fingers. I'm going to actually keep the first two fingers and remove the other fingers, just because this idea is that this is going to be grasping the pumpkin from the from above, and so it's going to have part of this hand hidden by the pumpkin. And we'll sort of adjust. We'll use our eraser tool a little bit later. So I'll right click on this, rasterize the layer, and I'll just do the same thing I did before with the magnetic lasso tool. So once again, you can kind of skip ahead until I get this totally removed here. Just zoom in some, and I'll start clicking around. I'm pressing delete to get rid of some of these anchor points here. I will clean this up. We're using the quick mask tool later on. Let's shape it up pretty simply. Get around here. The name of the game with any composite is to get a very clean selection. So the cleaner you can make your selection, obviously, the better your composite's going to be. Now it's clear to us that these are two different hands, but believe you me, no one notices this unless they're really being nitpicky. And the way we're going to be manipulating this later on is going to make it even harder to tell. So let's just go ahead and hit our quick mask, and I'll just fix this up. If you are still listening, the quick mask tool is a good way, is really effective if you have a pen input of some kind. So if you're using this on a tablet, or if, for instance, you're using like a Wacom tablet. We'll get to what Wacom tablets are later on. They're pretty handy input tools. If you're using a PC that doesn't have a pen input, like a touch screen rather. I'll get a pen tool here. Get off this quick mask. I'll just select some of these things. So once again, I'm using my pen tool to freshen up my selection, make sure everything I need is in there, because it's a little more exact. But it's hard. It's hard to do the entire thing with it without it being very tedious. Obviously, it looks better if you can do it. The whole thing. I think it's easier to make a good selection with the pen tool. But it is a little time consuming, and just for the purposes of this video, I'm not going to be using that just for the entire thing, but just for sort of custodial stuff, you might say. So I'm making a selection here. I'm trying to get rid of this little peak that's out there. I'll subtract this from the selection. You can do this however you like, but again, the more effort you put into making your selections good, the better. So undo's your friend here. And selection. Add the selection in this case. Same thing here. Sort of like a little. In this case, what we'll do is we'll just here curve this outwards. I'll make a selection right here. So whenever you have a path that's left open, if you make a selection, it forms like the shortest line possible between these 2 points here. And see that? So I'll make a selection, and I'll add to the selection here. That's good. Check my levels over here. Everything looks fine. There's a little bit of missing to the middle finger there. That's good. And so once again, I'll feather this 2 pixels just so I can keep the. I'm going to select, modify, feather, okay, and then I'll just go to my marquee tool and I'll do layer via copy, and then we'll just get rid of this. So I'll have my hand here, and I'll just apply the same changes I did to this hand. I'll make it just about the same size as the other hand, as best I can, approximating this. And I'll just pull this over here to the side. So the way I've got this, essentially I've got one hand gripping it from the top, holding it, sort of kind of holding it, resting on it, holding it in place, and I've got another hand gripping it from the bottom, sort of holding it up, right? I might make these a little bit bigger. Just put this up slightly. The same thing for these two layers. So if you hold down Shift and you select multiple layers, you can actually transform both of them at the same time, provided that they're editable. I'm gonna say that's probably a bit too big for this. I'll just back over here, pull this back up. Alright, that looks good. So you gotta make sure you have like the meat of the hand, kind of visible there. Alright, so that's good. I might just pull this in a little bit. I'll make this a little bit invisible. I'll make this a little bit opaque or transparent here so I can go in and clip off some more of this middle finger because some of this is going to be obscured pressing into the pumpkin here, as it were. So I'll just get rid of this like so. Alright. Just make selection. Let's press delete. Alright. That looks good. Just clean that up with the eraser tool here. Oops. Okay. Alright, so whoops. I'm on my Surface here, so the control button is really close to the Windows key, so I'll be pressing that several times this time. So once again, I'll go over here to my image adjustments, hue saturation tool, and I'll just pull this over to the side until I get that blue that I want. In this case, I'm trying to match it up to the blue that I used before. It's about. There you go. All right, great. Okay, cool. All right, so with that done, I'll do the same thing I did before with this little layer over here. I'm going to make a small sort of graphical element at the top there because the idea is here, as you can see, like the underside of his hand. In this case, I'm just going to make this real small, just a little peek out. From behind his hand, so let's make the same little curve there, and I'll just make a selection. Make selection, and I'll have this filled with white like I had before. And with that done, I'll use my move tool here. Oops, let me just get my marquee tool, and I'll just move this up out a little bit, just so I can kind of see it peek past there. Alright, maybe a little more. I'm using the marquee tool just to move a single part. I put this on the same layer as the earlier piece, and that'll come in handy later on. Alright. Okay. Alright, so to achieve this little kind of glittery look that I had to the final image here, I've got a couple things I'm adding onto it. The first thing I'm going to add onto it is this shall we say, just a close-up picture of some glitter. So I'm going to just drag that in. I'll shrink this. Oh, before I do anything else, I'm going to delete this for just a second here, and I'm going to do what I was talking about before using the Puppet Warp. Puppet Warp is a very powerful tool. It's really interesting. So let me just real quick show you what Warp is. I'll click on my transform controls and I'll go to Warp. Warp basically lays down a 9-point grid, and you can click on anywhere inside the grid, and you'll just move that grid sort of independently and extrapolate what it would do if like everything was sort of connected, like if you were like moving around sort of a piece of rubber. The things that they'll all stay in the same relation to where they are on the points. But as you move along, you can change things like, say, for instance, like the bowing out of everything. This works well, say for instance, if you're doing a face swap and you want to fit someone's face inside a person who has a bigger head inside their head, or something to that effect. But essentially, what we're doing is just pulling this around, just to So that's the warp tool. That's not super useful for this purpose here. What we're going to be using is the Puppet Warp tool. So instead of clicking on our transform controls, we're going to go to the Edit button at the top of the screen and find Puppet Warp. And Puppet Warp brings up these really neat little kind of concentric lines. And so what you want to do is create a line of what we'll call pins. And the pins essentially pin down your puppet. So I'm going to put a pin on the fingertips of each finger, including the thumb. I'm going to put a pin, say, on the knuckle here, and here, and here, maybe here as well. and on the I usually keep there. I'll put one on the knuckle of the thumb towards here. I might put another one over here since like I'll leave it there, and then I'll put one in the middle of the hand. Just to kind of keep it from moving. I'll put one down here at the bottom as well, so I can keep the bottom in place. I want to keep this hand in generally the same place. So essentially what you do, once you hit the pins, have the pins in place, imagine this as if like you have that same effect where you have the ability to kind of stretch this thing, but the pins will hold things in place as opposed to the grid. So I'm going to hover over one of the pins I put down and just click and drag it, and as you can see I'm moving my thumb up a little bit, sort of independent from the rest of the hand, right? And so the places where the pins aren't is stretching to kind of like compensate for how far the thumb is moving, but everything else is sort of staying put. So I'm going to kind of curve this in or up a little bit, see if I can't have it sort of press up against the pumpkin. I might even stretch it out some. And I'll do the same thing for this finger. I'm going to pull this in. We have this curve upwards. So I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'll pull this up a little bit. And I'll try to avoid having this. I'm going to even put another pin here and curve this out a little bit. There you go. And I'll do the same thing here. I'll just click on this. I'll just pull this over a little bit. Just kind of have it wrapping around the pumpkin some. I'll do the same thing here. And the same thing here. Kind of have it moving up a little bit. Maybe I'll even just drag this down slightly. Have it sort of have the hand sort of bowing out a little bit. I'll press enter, and you can kind of see. So I'll show you the difference. Here's you just back it up here. Here's the first way the hand looked, and here's the new way the hand looks. You can see it's not necessarily like I would say photorealistic, but it adds something to it. It makes it look as if the hand is actually sort of interacting with the pumpkin. So we might not have to do too much here, but I'll click on this layer. I'll do the same thing, edit, puppet warp, and I'll just kind of put some pins. I'll put a pin here in the tip of the thumb, here at the base of the thumb, here on the wrist, here on the knuckle, here on the tip of the index finger, and here on the tip of the middle finger, maybe one right here as well. And so I can actually grab this. I can kind of pull this down some to have him sort of like pressing his thumb into it. I'll pull this in some. I'll pull this towards the thumb a little bit more, just so it looks sort of like wrapping around there. Press enter, and so once again, we look at the original, we look at the new one, right? So it looks like he's actually gripping the pumpkin a little bit better, or she, if she has manly hands. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to add my little glittery effect. The way I'm going to do this is just by pulling in this little gold glitter here, and I'll shrink this down a good deal to cover my hand here. And I want this to sort of show up on the hand. I'll put this opacity down some just so I can see what I'm looking at here. I want this to show up on the hand, but I also want it to look as if it sort of belongs on the hand, not like I'm just sort of, like it's wrapping around the hand. So let me see if I can't show you what I'm talking about here. I'll pull this down. All right, so first off, what I'm going to do is I'll bring up the opacity here. I'm going to desaturate this. Adjustments. I'll just click on desaturate. Oh, in this case, I have to rasterize the layer first. Rasterize the layer. Okay, refine that. Edit image adjustments. Desaturate. I'll pull up the contrast here just to make it, or pull the level. So I'm going to go to edit, image adjustment levels. I'll pull the levels slightly just to make it a bit lighter. Make the light stand out. And then I'm going to change the color, the layer mode from normal to screen, which will kind of allow us to see what's beneath it, and take away some of the darker parts and leave it on top. Leave the lighter parts, which is why we just desaturated it so we would see more of just the white and give it sort of a starry kind of a galaxy look. So in order to kind of make this fit, I don't want to get rid of the entire layer. What I want to do is I want to the information. I want to sort of keep it, but I want to also constrain it just to the shape of the hand. So I'm going to go over here to my hand layer. I'm going to press the I'll press the magic wand tool here. I'll click outside the hand, and I'll go over here and I'll just create a layer mask. Let me just actually select the inverse first. And then I'll do the same thing, layer mask, right? So now what I'll do is I'll select my layer here. Make sure you have your little layer selected. I'll go to Edit, Puppet Warp, and it's going to give me the same kind of options I had before. But in this case, what I want to do is I want to kind of tug some things in just to kind of make it look as if it's wrapping around there. So I'm just going to click down the line of the fingers, and I'll click sort of on the edge of the fingers as well. And I'll just pull this in some. And as you can see, I'm actually pulling in information from stuff that's outside of the layer mask. Right, actually, I'm not. I actually do this before I put my layer mask on there. All right, so I'll do the same thing here. I'll just do the puppet warp, edit, puppet warp, and I want to sort of constrain this. I'll put a line down the finger and some outside the finger here, and see if I can't. Oops, I see. And I'll just pull this in some. Actually here. Let me just delete this pin. And so, here we go. We're going to go and sort of alternating where I put this. I'll just pull this, squeeze this in some. Like so. And I'll do the same thing to the other 5 fingers here. I'll put one on one side, one on the other side. Alright, so depending on how detailed you want to get to it, you can do this for every little stretch of this. But the puppet warp works well with, like, say for instance, I'll just do these changes here, and I'll just do the same thing for these 4 fingers, just to tell you what I'm talking about here. Puppet warp, one side and to other. We'll do it with the pinky as well. See if we can get to wrap around there. See some. So, all right. Okay, and then we'll press enter, and then we'll play our layer mask, right? So it's this, select the inverse, and layer mask. All right. Oops. Wrong. Select inverse and. Make sure you have your layer mask on the right layer. That's what I did wrong. Alright, so now we can see we have this little glowy effect here. I'll do the same thing. I'll just take this. I'll just duplicate this layer here. Right click on the name, duplicate this layer. So it has the same mode and everything. I'll just take off the layer mask for now. So I'll just delete layer mask for now. And I'll just move it over here on top of the hand that we made. And I'll just pull this around so it fits, and we'll right. So, and do the same. Well, I'll just skip the puppet warp for now, and I'll just do the same thing. I'll just make the inverse, and then we'll make our layer mask. All right. Okay, so just to kind of give this a little bit of, shall we say, flavor, make it look very sparkly. We'll pull in these lens flares here. So lens flare looks nice, but what we want to do is we want to desaturate it. So I'm going to make it very small, and I'm going to desaturate this guy. So I'm going to edit image adjustments, saturation, and I'll just pull down the saturation a good deal. I'll pull the lightness a good deal as well, which will make it look like it's kind of a glowing, a real bright glowing spot there. I need to make it a bit bigger. And I move tool here, and I'll just So what's great about this is that you can sort of have this change here, and you can just make as many copies as you like by holding down the Alt key and just clicking and dragging it. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key, I'm just going to click, I'm going to drag, I'll make a new one. And I'm just going to place them in various spots around my hand here, except for the tips of the fingers. So I'm going to save something, save the tips of the fingers to something a little bit different. So I'll just put this right here, right here. Okay. I'll pull some over here to the other hand. If you want to go find a new lens flare that you think looks better, you're welcome to. And then we'll do one last thing. We'll just do a couple of these here. One too many. If you want to find a different lens flare that you like better, you can obviously do that. And then as a final sort of flare here, we'll make a new layer. We'll get our pen tool here, and I'm going to make us. I'm going to create sort of glowing additions. I'm going to have the fingernails glow. Now, if you want to find different hands, if you want to find, say, like for instance, ladies' hands with long fingernails, you can always do that. If you want to like make these a little bit thinner to make them look like ladies' hands, you can always do that as well. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make these little selections. I'm going to get them real close, and I'm going to see if I can't sort of figure out where the thumbnail would be here. I'm just going to create a little shape for my thumbnail, like so. I'll make this into a selection. All right, and I'll just leave that there, and I'm going to make sure I'm going to be adding to my selection each time I go make a new fingernail. So I'm going to see if I can approximate where the fingernail might be. So mimic the size and shape of it. Alright, selection. Add to selection. Make sure we're adding to the selection so we have all of our stuff here. I'll do the same thing over here. Selection. Maybe he has a long fingernail on his ring finger, so we can cover up the mistake I made when I made the selection here. Okay. We'll do that same thing over here. Okay, and I'll just make selection. Okay, all right. Oops. I think I got my other selections. Make selection. Add to the, which we're always adding to the selection, so we keep our other selections here. Oh, I lost one. I probably lost two. Okay. L5. This one. Okay, so with that done, what we have here are 5 little selections that we're just going to fill with white. So you click anywhere inside of any of the selections, they all fill up with white. And then we're going to add a outer glow to these things. So I'm going to go to right click on this, go to my blending options, and click on outer glow, which is going to have them all sort of exude the sort of like soft glow here. So I'm going to have my spread, I will pull out my spread up to like, say, maybe 20 or so. And I pull my size down to like 100. But you can obviously do this as big as you'd like. If you want these things to just be shining, then obviously you can just do a really intense one. I would suggest some restraint with these because you want to still see the pumpkin behind it. And I'm going to sort of right click on this. I'm going to sort of copy the layer style, and I'm going to go down to these the little layer we made before. So if I pull out a little bit here, and you can see the little white graphic elements we put on behind the hands, I'll paste the layer style to these, so they'll glow as well. And then I'll just I have like 1.5 or 2.5 fingernails here. And I'll just do the same thing I did before. I'll just zoom in here and I'll just make the thumbnail here so they can kind of approximate where that might have been. I think it's like this. I think it's at an angle here. And this person here has apparently choose their nails. Very, very short nails here. So not a great habit, but I can relate. Alright. We'll just make selection. And we'll just go ahead and fill this one with white. So it automatically glows because it's on the same layer. And then we'll just do the same thing over here. Make these sort of like half viewed. Fingernails here, make selection. And one more. Alright. Okay. Oops, okay. So what I'll do is I'll just plug this in here in a second. That'd be wonderful, wouldn't it, for the recording to end? Okay, so plugged in. Anytime. There you go, Mark. Okay, so the last thing we'll do, we'll call this just about done, is we're going to add some shadow that, as if the hand that's emitting light is causing its own shadow here, like the solid elements are blocking out the light from the sort of ethereal elements, as it were. So ghosts that cause shadows. So in order to do that, I'm going to get down to my pumpkin level here. I'm going to make a new layer right above the pumpkin layer. I'm going to switch my color to black, grab my brush tool. I'll change it to like a very 0% or a very soft brush, and I'll change the opacity into like 25 or so. And so that way what I can do is I can actually just add degrees of shadow. I'm just going to size my brush up a little bit here. And I'm just going to have it like kind of inside the hand. So like instead of like having it behind the thumb, I'll have it inside the thumb and inside everything here. And so you can just kind of watch what I do here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to start, because I'm working on a different layer, I'm just going to start on top of the thumb and kind of work my way out. So just depending on how big this is going to be. So I'll just make this little shadow here. And the reason why it's 25% is so I can sort of add sort of diffuse layers to it. It'll kind of get less and less. I can even make it even more transparent here, and I'll just see if I can do here. Let's pull this out alongside the underside, and we'll just pull that down like so. There we go. I have like a bit of a shadow on the outside, and then a deeper shadow real close to the nail, or real close to the finger, like so. This will just add some depth to it, make it seem as if it's actually interacting with it. Light's playing off of it. Do the same thing here. I'll have it like right outside the thumb, but more like inside the hand. And depending on where you put it, it changes sort of like the idea of what's happening here. So let's put that on the shadow, and the same thing right about here where this is pressing into it. Okay. And the logic that we kind of came up with, this part of the pumpkin is actually showing through. It's actually not kind of covering. So you could conceivably have a shadow here, but what you would probably have is just pumpkin there. Honestly, I don't really like that really dark area of shadow. I'll pull that back and just one more. Right. Good stuff. Okay. So we'll call that done. So we can't center it. We can just select all of our groups, all of our layers, except for the background. Hold down Shift, and then we'll just hit our Move tool, which will allow us to kind of like position this until it sort of hits the approximate center there. So whatever you use, if you use the pumpkin, that's totally fine. If you decide to use something else, cannot wait to see you guys produce. But in the meantime, I think this is just like a fun sort of tool just to kind of learn about the different modes that we have here and different options we have for combining different elements and putting in our own graphic elements with our pen and our brush, like the shadows and the glow and the fingernails and stuff like that. So cool. Well, can't wait to see you guys produce. Go ahead and save this as a JPEG and submit it to D12. Very cool. See you in class.